What is going on, everybody? Thank you for joining me once again on the Roaming Prepper channel. This is your host, Pete. And today I want to talk about the most wonderful time of the year, but it's not Christmas. And I'm being sarcastic. It's not always wonderful. Sometimes, other than being hot, it's sometimes traumatic, chaotic, confusing, and startling. What am I talking about? I'll be right back and I will talk to you about what time of year it is, and more importantly, why you need to understand this time of year. I'll be right back and we're going to talk about that. What is going on, everybody? Thanks for joining me once again. This is the Roaming Prepper channel. I'm your host, Pete. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And my camera's all screwed up. Hold on a second here. All right. I think we got it. Maybe. I'm not sure. Anyhow, um, what time of year is it? What am I talking about? Before I go any further, again, like, subscribe. If you want to share, that's great. I normally premiere these videos, and I normally am in my own premiere. Sometimes I'm not. If I'm not, feel free to chat in the chat while I'm gone. My mods have been super awesome. And if you have a specific question for me, you can either put it in the comments below the video, or you can reach out to me at the roamingprepper@gmail.com, and I will be happy to come back and get you later. So, what am I talking about? Hurricane season. It is almost here. Officially speaking, it's June 1st, but we all know that's not quite the case. And I, having gone through eight hurricanes, nine with my family, Harvey being the last one, but going backwards, Harvey, Ike, Rita, Lily, was it Charlie? And then it was the tax day floods, the the April monsoon. There were a bunch of other little tropical storms, and some weren't even actual hurricanes. There were just these ugly storm systems that came and flooded everything. Um, I actually was at a. I've been blessed that I lived on high ground, and just by dumb luck, we like the pine trees, and pine trees will only exist well in high ground areas that don't flood, and so we always wind up in the pine tree areas along the coast, which tend to be the highest ground. And everyone around us flooded, but we didn't. So, good luck there. But that being said, we still had to deal with the wind, the rain, the damage, the mess, etc. So, hurricane season. For those of you unfamiliar, we're already getting whacked with the derecho, which came from the west coast, went across the country, dropped a bunch of tornadoes and flooding and hail everywhere. We've had tornadoes. As a matter of fact, this morning, this is Memorial Day weekend. This morning, I got multiple notifications from the corporate security people saying if you live or work in this areas, Denton and Oklahoma and Arkansas, they had hurricanes, they had hail. It's just been a really wild weather spring, and largely because we're going from El Nino, La Nina, that transition, and the weather's just freaking out. But truth be told, this happens every year, right? We get hurricanes every year. They always say this will be the busiest season ever. And very often it's a busy season, but maybe two out of 15 or 20 actually hit the US or Canada or anything like that. We've had a few that were really nasty that went hit the East Coast and then went up and hit Canada and Newfoundland and all that. So, hurricane season, always a challenge, always exciting. So, I want to share my own experiences. First of all, um, hurricanes are one of those I often talk about the most likely scenarios, like the 80-90% likely to happen. Flooding, tornadoes, fires, hurricanes are in that group, to me anyway. Massive storms in that group. Um, as opposed to like EMP, which is like a 5%, 1% chance, would be very bad, but it's a very small likelihood versus a hurricane, which we damn well know they're going to get. Somebody's going to get one. So let's assume that's in your 90%, 80%, the Pareto rule, 80-20, it's in your 80% category. Great. The fundamentals are the same for hurricanes, floods, tornadoes. Difference being that tornadoes will actually destroy your house very quickly. Hurricanes, you kind of see them coming most of the time, uh, because they're big and slow versus like a tornado that's hauling ass across the county. Uh, what do you need? Well, first of all, water. Um, Water is probably one of the most important things you need to have. Uh, Enough for drinking, enough for cooking, and you also want some extra, which you can use tap water with some bleach in it for things like flushing, hygiene, dishes, stuff like that. Make sure you have uh, both canned food, dehydrated food, and food that you can just eat, like crackers and bread. It doesn't have to be fancy. As a matter of fact, you can go to the store, get those like, and those aren't great for you, but the Pillsbury Doughboy like breads that you get a little Italian loaf. And people say, well, if the power goes out, you have to refrigerate them. Well, no, you bake them immediately. Like you go get them, you bake them in the house. Because I'll eat stale bread, right? Unless it has bugs in it, bread is good even when it's stale. You dip it in your coffee or something. And the dogs will happily eat stale bread because it's a crunchy treat for them. So make sure you have some bread, make sure you have the basics. Remember, stocking up on things like egg and milk don't make sense because if the power goes out and you don't have a backup system of some type, it's just going to spoil in your fridge, and then your fridge will be a disaster. Speaking of that, I have the big jackeries and the little jackery. I've done reviews on those. I'll put a link to some option for you may have for power options that you may want to consider in the links below the video. But again, do your homework, find an option. I have a gas generator that also runs on propane, a portable one, plus I have the jackeries. So I have options. In case I run out of gas, I can switch to the jackeries, vice versa. And it gives me a little bit of diversity in what I can do. Have a means to cook properly or to boil water, not just a camping stove with the little green propane bottles. Get a butane stove. Remember your outdoor grill, if it doesn't get destroyed in the storm, with the 5-gallon propane tank can still be used to boil water or to cook meals. So you have options there as well. And then, of course, the ever present canned food, MREs, stuff like that, the Ready Wise and Mountain House foods, the nutrient survival type foods. All of these items are good for you to, have some options. Again, prepping for a hurricane is about having options. As far as making your house ready, if you're further inland, boarding up your windows is kind of hit and miss. I boarded up once, a couple of times when I was in Louisiana because I was much closer to the coast. In Houston, I was actually on the north side of the city, so I was far away from a lot of that flying debris. What I did do is secure my yard. Uh, Lawn chairs, trash cans, stuff like that. I tied them basically in a bundle. So they rolled around the ground, but they weren't light enough to take airborne. My neighbor's trampoline, however, went over my yard into the neighbor's yard and then rolled around there and destroyed some shit and then went flying. And I think they found what was left of the trampoline outside the subdivision. So if you have a trampoline, stake it down, get some tent stakes, and it may not hold, but at least do your best to secure your trampoline, or even better yet, flip it over so the trampoline part, the tramp, I don't know, that sounds terrible. Anyway, the bouncy part is face down, and then stake it down using rope and a tent peg. Put some rope, take a tent peg, drive it in. Don't hit your power lines or your sprinklers or anything, and peg it down. Do the best you can to secure your stuff, not just for yourself, but for your neighbors. Because if your stuff or your trees fly into their shit, you could be liable. Speaking of trees, trim your trees, trim your bushes, whatever plant life you have so it doesn't come crashing down on your roof, at least the best you can. Pine trees, for example, don't usually flip over. Live oaks will fall over. Pine trees won't, but the top third breaks. It's almost like a fail-safe part. It goes clink and it goes flying down. And that's what causes a lot of power outages because these chunks of tree go flying into transformers and they blow up and catch fire, and then now you have a whole nother mess. um, Speaking of that, having sandbags, if you think you might flood or like your neighbor's property is prone to flooding, it'll kind of slow the flow of water down, give you an option to deal with that. Clean out your gutters, clean out your French drains, clean out your drainage. If you have to dig a drain ditch, do that as well. And last but not least, be mindful of the situation. If you have a lot of power lines in your area and they come down, you don't want your kids and dogs in that. They could get zapped or they can get hung up. And remember, when it's flooding, nature will come out, right? Snakes, spiders, scorpions, whatever the hell you got in your area will come out looking for higher ground. So you don't want to be walking around in the water and, step on a copperhead or a rattlesnake. Nobody needs that. Depending on where you live, what kind of snake you have. Definitely don't want a water moccasin. Those guys are aggressive, unlike a rattlesnake, and they will mess you up if they bite you. So yeah, don't play with those. Um, Also, remember, if the power goes out, crime tends to increase because the power's out, right? They think like, especially if people evacuate. So if you evacuate and you have a neighbor who's staying that you trust, let them know, hey, we're going to leave with the kids or we're going to leave with grandma. Keep an eye on the house. We've had that happen. We had neighbors who had an elder. They were taking the grandma or mom was living with a couple, and we had another neighbor across the street had a disabled son. He chose not to leave, but the folks with the elders did. So we had just had this very informal meeting in the cul-de-sac, and we said we were staying because the kids were older, and I already had one boy in the guard. I was like, yeah, we're fine. Um, we said we're staying. We're going to be here, and they said, well, look, we're going to leave. Can you keep an eye on the house? And so what we did, we kind of the two neighbors that stayed on that street, a lot of folks left. The ones that stayed, once as between the bursts of the storm, we'd walk the street, walk the cul-de-sac safely, and just look around and see if anything had taken damage, anyone was hurt. We check on each other. Also, one of the people who evacuated actually got a tree limb through a window. So we were able to text them and say, hey, look, we got your number. You left it for us. This is your neighbor, Pete, and you have a broken window on the second floor. I can't reach it with my ladder, but just be aware. And I sent him pictures. He was able to make an insurance claim from the hotel they were at based on the pictures I gave him. So you can help your neighbors out as well. I have a drone license, recreational one for now. I'm scheduled to take my FAA later this year. But if you have a drone, you can be very valuable. You can even make a little bit of side money telling insurance companies, hey, I will fly a property for you, take a video, and you pay me X for my troubles. And a little bit of extra cash doesn't hurt during a hurricane. Last but not least, the basics. Have some cash, have the water, fill up your gas tanks, fill up your spare gas, have a first aid kit, and most importantly, think through, walk the house and look and say, do I need more cat food? Do I need dog food? Do we need more trash cans or trash bags in case we have to pick up debris? I made a whole nother video about PPE. I'll put some links for that as well. Hard hats, steel toes, work gloves, work pants. If you have a lot of debris on the ground, you don't want to be walking around in flip flops and shorts. My youngest son actually was helping a neighbor, had a cut on his foot. I don't remember how he got the cut itself, but he was in the dirty water, and the water from the floods is dirty. It will overflow pig farms, it'll overflow sewage, and you will have this nasty soup of biological shit in the floodwaters. Anyway, he was helping a neighbor, really didn't think about it. I told him go take a shower. That cut on his foot got infected, and he wound up having to have a minor surgery and stitches in his foot, which he said was the most painful thing he's ever gone through. And this is when he was a teenager. He's now spent 5 years in the army, and he said my injuries in the army were nothing like that. That hurt more than anything in the army. So that'll tell you you don't want to get those kind of infections. Having some antibiotics, knowing how to use the antibiotics. um, I will tell you right now, as the father-in-law of an oncologist, he has told me things like the Jace case, which is great, or other antibiotic kits. They're great to have, but if you dose incorrectly, you will mess yourself up. You can actually cause yourself a serious health incident. And now you've self induced a trip to the ER trying to avoid something else. So make sure you understand dosages. Most of the companies like Jace, like these other companies, have a phone number. If the phones are still working, you can call and get a consult and say, hey, I have an open cut. These are the bottles I have available. What should I take? What dosage? This is my age, my weight, and they can give you a more intelligent uh, description of how you should dose yourself in an emergency. Again, first aid kits and basic meds, Advils, Tylenols, because if you're moving debris, you may just pull a muscle, hurt yourself a little bit. Make sure you take the time to think through what you're doing. Get someone to help. Don't try and move a tree limb by yourself if it's too heavy. Ask some neighbors, hey, I need to move this off my roof, or I have this debris here. Typically, what I've found is our block, especially in Louisiana, the folks there were top-notch people. Um, Everyone came out after the storm had passed, and we were checking on each other. And pretty much at that point, we all grabbed trash bags and gloves, and we just went up and down the street. We cleaned our own properties, and then we started going to the neighbors because I had less mess than one guy because his tree came down. So we started pulling stuff out and trying to help him as well. And at the end of the day, if the neighborhood comes together and cleans up and gets rid of the debris and the glass and the danger, it benefits everybody in the community. And I have found in my experience that communities will step up most of the time. Or let me say this, most of the people will step up. The communities always step up. It's a question of how many participate. I found living in Texas, Louisiana, down on the coast, people would come out in bulk to help. And even at night, we had a few of the duck hunters in Louisiana in particular. One of them set up a deer stand at the end of the street because it was kind of a U shaped. And at night, he would sit up there with a radio, and all of us put on our little FRS radios to a certain channel. And he just watched the neighborhood and make sure we didn't have anybody. I know myself and another neighbor, we'd take shifts. We would just walk the neighborhood 10 o'clock at night. We could open carry in that state, and we all had permits anyway. We would walk the street. The sheriff would come by or one of the deputies, and he'd see us. We'd be sitting barbecuing, talking late, and he'd just come to check in. And we're like, no, we're keeping an eye. And we had the shotguns on the patio. No, nobody being stupid. Step up for your community. Get your neighbors to step up. You might be surprised. Now, not everyone is blessed like that. You might just have douchebag neighbors. Then take care of yourself. But remember, be smart. Think through what you're doing. Remember the basics: food, water, meds. I want to share one website with you that I think is very relevant. And this is specific to Houston, but there are other uh, websites for your area. So this is the Harris County Flood Warning System. So what this is, I'm going to do last one. They show historical. Boop. So this is Harris County. Harris County is where Houston is. So Houston's kind of downtown here, right? This is this Chinatown, Montrose, Vietnam town. They call it Chinatown. It's actually Vietnam town here. A lot of Vietnamese families, Latinos over here. You got the black community. Yeah, everybody. It's kind of like New York. It has this little like different cultures landed in different places. Bougie is up here, shopping is over here. But you can look and it'll say, okay, where are your watersheds? You can click watersheds and bam, it gives you all the drainage sections. So the Edgeworth, this is the Greens Bayou, this is the Cedar Bayou, this is the Jackson Bayou. Then you can look, let's just say 100 days out, show historical, bam, and you can see the historical rainfall in the last 100 days. I'm going to remove that so you can see a little better. You see how? So you see on this northwest side of town, they're 20 inches in the last 100 days. That's a lot of rain, y'all. But then you can look at the channels. Well, what goes through there? Well, Spring Creek goes through there. There's a lot of drainage goes through there. This is another drainage route. This is another drainage route. You can do channel status. Everything's green. It's clear. Um, right? If it gets something gets blocked up, they're going to change the color. See, and it shows. I don't know if you can see that. It shows the current level of water in the. Oh, hold on. Let me share that one as well. Sorry, it opened in a different window, and I wasn't expecting that. Here we go. You click on that watershed, it shows you the current level, and then you can go back the last 1 year and it shows you when the heaviest rain came, which ironically was a bunch in February. You had spikes, and that's as far as back as you can go, I think, on this particular map. But it shows you the elevation, it shows you how much water is currently in the system, and then if it floods, it's actually the little water symbol is going to be up here. So it's an actually amazingly useful tool in trying to understand your area. And other counties have this. It's not just Houston. This is just the one Houston have, which I think is great. But also, if you're moving to this area, let's just say you get a relo, you get a job offer. The economy is garbage, right? So you get a good offer, and you're like, okay, fine, I'm moving to Houston. You can look here, do a historical view. Say, let me see if I can get this to play nicely. Oh my goodness, I just screwed that up. Hold on a second here, folks. So rainfall. Let's do rainfall for the last 365 days, right? Let me see if it'll do that. And it told me no. No, actually, it did. Look. So this area had 42 inches of rain in the last year. This had 44.56. And you notice this is right by Lake Houston. It's by the Trinity River. You got a lot of rivers on that side, right? Galveston Bay, Trinity Bay empties out here. Uh, even far out inland, higher elevation, 51 inches up here at this intersection. They've had 53 here. They've had 43. So keep in mind, Houston was built over a bayou, over a swamp, basically. So there's a lot of drainage. The ground absorbs water, but as they've built more homes and more roads, it floods worse now because the water can't make it into the ground. They're starting to change to that porous cement, not on the highways, but in the subdivisions, that allows water to seep through the cement into the ground and drain naturally, as opposed to channeling everything um, into these channels and causing flooding. So you can see it just this is an amazing tool for people to use. And I don't know, how do I turn this off now? Well, I click this damn thing and it won't go away now. Well, clearly I've made a mistake. But anyway, you guys get the picture. If you relocate, or if you currently live in an area and you're just curious, with new buildings, with new construction, with new roads, the flooding changes. We found that out during Harvey. Areas that had never flooded in 100 years flooded then, and places we thought would flood did not, because they built roads, bridges. A lot of the farmland that surrounded Houston is no longer there because they've built subdivisions and stores on it. And so the water starts going in different directions. And people who didn't have flood insurance because they were technically not in the flood zones wound up getting flooded, and it ate their lunch because they had no flood insurance. I've gotten to a point that I will buy flood insurance. Is usually about 500 bucks a year. I'll buy the flood insurance regardless of where I'm at. Even though I'm in West Texas, we're at 3,000 foot elevation out here. When we do get water, because of the way the ground, the earth is, the geology, the water doesn't absorb very well. So 43 inches in Houston over a year, you might have flooded maybe once or twice, other than a hurricane. I can get 5 inches here, and the main roads are unpassable because the water has nowhere to go. It doesn't absorb because the ground, the rocks, the dirt just doesn't absorb the water the way it should. Understanding your area, understanding how it floods can inform you. If you check your flood map and you find out you now live in a flood zone, that's a great time to go get flood insurance. Because if you don't and you get flooded, that's a major SHTF. It's bad enough your house got flooded, but now you're not covered. And regular home insurance will not cover flooding. I can't say this enough. Regular home insurance that you get when you mortgage out a new home will not cover flooding. Even if you've paid off your property and you just have basic insurance, it will not cover flooding. Flooding is a completely separate creature in pretty much every state I've lived in. Do some homework. If you think you could flood potentially, I promise you it's worth the 500 bucks a year. Now, does the money come in quickly? No, but eventually it does come in, right? You can arrange contractors, you can arrange repairs, relocation if you need to, based on the fact that you have that insurance. But if you don't have it in the first place, you're absolutely SOL. You can't get the money because what it does, it covers your appraised value plus some extra for your home. Like, and when I say some, I mean 50, 100 grand in possessions plus your house. Say if your house is 250, I'm just throwing numbers out here. It's 250 for the house minus a deductible plus, and the deductible is a few thousand, plus contents. It takes a while for the money to come in, but eventually you get it and you can move on, rebuild, and move on with your life. Without it, you're on the hook. Even if the house is destroyed, if you've got any kind of mortgage on it or a lien on it, you still owe that money. Whether you even can live on the property or not is irrelevant. That's what people in Katrina found out. It was very heartbreaking. A lot of people in Houston found this out. Also heartbreaking because they found out the hard way. So, folks, do your homework. Hurricanes are not a joke, but they're absolutely manageable, 100% survivable. And if you take the right precautions and the right preps now, you don't find out the hard way later. That's it for this one. This went longer than I intended, but it was a lot to unpack. Till next time, be good, be safe, God bless, and I will see you on the next video. You guys keep out of trouble.